showing on YouTube. Maybe a little bit of a delay, but it says it's showing. And I'm seeing it going. Okay.
Awesome.
So while we wait for a moment, how was your week, guys?
Mine's been pretty good. I mean, it's a little slow right now just because July tends to be a month a lot of people take time off and they start
You got a good keynote.
I did, yeah.
Coming up. I know you can't talk about it much, but it's exciting.
Yeah. That one is it's going to be in February, but it's a big one, and they had I think 1,300 or 1,400 submissions, and they take 50 speakers. So
wow,
it's a that's a I don't know what I'm not good at math, but that's like maybe 2%, 2.5%, something like that. So,
gotcha. Looks like we have Melinda Owens joining us in our YouTube chat.
Hey, Melinda. All right, wait a minute. I should get on the YouTube chat, I guess.
No problem.
Yeah. Let's see if I can. But yeah.
We've got some good topics today I think people can talk about. Doreen has joined us. What's going on, Doreen? Is it ridiculously hot in Tampa Bay? I can only assume. It's ridiculously hot here. It's ridiculously hot in Pennsylvania, I'm sure. Yeah. The wood chippers are like too hot to touch. The cowtails melt in your mouth before they ever get to your mouth. Hey, Michelle, good to see you.
Yeah, I can speak. Doreen is in Tampa, where they may be getting a little bit of a tropical storm. We here in Deerfield Beach on the southeast side, we're going to miss this one, thankfully, but I think it's hopefully not going to be that bad.
We have Tamara and Michelle in the house in Connecticut and in Georgia and Connecticut. Hot and humid even in Connecticut, they said.
Damn.
Well, I guess that's a start. So for those that are joining us for the first time, hello and welcome to the ThreeView Mirror podcast. Now filmed live each and every week in front of a live studio audience, so that as we play in the backyards of our virtual homes with our bikes out front, you guys can see the bikes, see where we're playing, and join in. Just come in the back and play along in real time every Friday at 5:30-ish as we come up with 3 different topics coming from the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, the Gen X era pop culture. And every week, one of us is hosting and has a secret connection that runs through all 3 of the topics they've chosen for the week. Now, they and only they know what that secret connection is, and the other 2 hosts, along with everybody in our studio audience and at home as well, gets an opportunity to try to guess as we deliver 15 minutes to each topic before a grand reveal at the end. My name is John Katrides, better known as Gen X Jono on some of my social media outlets. I'm joined with 2 hosts who I will allow to introduce themselves, starting with you, Shell.
I'm Rochelle O'Black, better known as Gen X Shell across my social media channels, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.
And I'm Chris Clues, better known as Chris Clues. I'm a keynote speaker and author, and you can find all of my books on Amazon and likely in some of the independent bookstores near you.
Sweet. And this is another episode of the ThreeView Mirror podcast.
It is a cool song, though.
Well, hello and welcome. I got the special effects to work today. I got a few more surprises. I felt a little bit ambitious today. And so far, we'll see if today Doreen from Tampa Bay can go 2 for 2 on topics. She guessed it last week. I'm the host this week, and I got 3 great topics for all of y'all. Starting with Dallas, moving on to Thelma and Louise, and then finishing off with Mountain Dew. Do the do. Now, Dallas, although a great city, I'm not talking about the city itself. I'm talking about the primetime phenomenon that was the first major primetime soap that had everyone in the world asking who shot JR at one point. I'm talking, of course, about the CBS primetime soap Dallas. And And if you guys aren't sure if you've seen it, if it strikes a bell or anything, here's a little clue to bring back some memory. One of the best intros ever.
While the Dallas theme was going on, can I just point out, because I was on our YouTube channel, it's a little bit behind, that the picture of us reminds me of Sprockets from Saturday Night Live, if you remember that. Michael Myers. This is the time that we dance, and we're all dancing in the corner anyway. Awesome.
So let's take a minute for those watching on chat. Did y'all see the ThreeView Mirror intro come on? I'm hoping everything that was set to live. I think it worked. I'm hoping it worked. If not, you missed it, and I'll make sure it works next week. At any rate, I'm going to let you guys take over. What do you think? Did you watch Dallas? You were super, super young, I would guess, Shell, when it came on. I was about, 8, 9, 10, the first few seasons. It aired in the late 70s through 1.5 billion different seasons. Well, talk about it.
Well, I had to do just a little bit of looking up of Dallas on here because I never watched the show personally, but I cannot say that I haven't seen clips that I didn't, because it was a pop culture icon of a television show. I've seen clips. I know about Who Shot JR. I can sing the theme song, but I think when it was on, maybe I was sitting in the living room while my parents were watching it, but for the most part, I was probably tuned out to it. So, I remember the characters, but I don't really remember the show all that much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm the same way in that these nighttime soap operas are such a staple of the 80s, late 70s into, the late 80s. And then there was that interesting transition to these nighttime soap operas that were really designed for almost people that were about 10 years younger than the ones that Dallas and Dynasty and those were designed for. We got into the Beverly Hills 90210 and the Melrose Place, which were the same type of thing, but they were obviously designed for a younger crowd. And that evolution that we've talked about before with music, from the kind of the end of metal when grunge came along, it was almost like the end of the nighttime soap opera for our parents, maybe, that became the nighttime soap operas for us. So I was the same way. I was very young. I could sneak a peek at some of these nighttime soap operas, but typically it was like, go away, go play your Atari.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, sorry, John.
I was just going to say, for me, it was forced family viewing time. It was absolutely us kids in the room with our parents. Appropriate, not appropriate, I don't know. I've mentioned many, many times, especially in the 70s when I was real young, my parents had been in this country at that point, maybe 6 or 7 years. Now, remember, they didn't speak a word of English before getting here. So it was a curve as they became more and more comfortable with English. And in the earliest years, we would watch with our parents in order to be in-home interpreters to explain that JR was sabotaging Sue Ellen, that he was trying to get her to drink again, to push her into the sanitarium so that he could sleep with Kristen, her sister. Bobby, it was ridiculous, the things that I remember as a kid having to explain to my parents, but they were vested, and they're like, listen, don't tell anyone at school what happens in the house. What goes on in the house stays in the house. If your teacher asks, you were in bed by 8, but shut up and listen so that you can tell me what's going on.
You see, I wanted to bring up about Chris's point when he said our soap operas were the 90210s and such, but how old were, in my eyes, the people that were starring in Dallas were so much older. In my eyes, they were 30. And John, you're really good at looking up how old was Linda Gray, right? Linda Gray.
Right.
Larry Hagman.
No,
Larry Hagman.
Larry Hagman.
Larry Hagman. How old were they in the show?
So, they were older. They did a great job bringing people in from other places where we knew them. Like Larry Hagman was very much a household name from the time that he spent on I Dream of Jeannie. When he was that's when he would have been young, appearing old. He was in his 20s during the earliest seasons of I Dream of Jeannie. And I remember thinking he looked older then. In Dallas, he was definitely older. Sue Ellen was definitely older. Bobby had already done his stint on the man from Atlantis. So, I mean, they took established actors and brought them in, but there were, Priscilla Presley did a stint on Dallas. It became such a huge part of pop culture for the storylines, for the fact that it took us out of the poor, impoverished 70s and helped bring in the glitzy 80s. You went from shows that showed everyone in the projects to South Fork Ranch, and every single car was a Mercedes, and it was Ewing 1 and Ewing 2 and Ewing 3 on their personalized license plates. It sold a different dream of what America could be to Americans.
Yeah, and I also find it, what was cool about Dallas too is that we're so accustomed these days to our TV shows now, giving us cliffhangers or being willing to take out main characters or give the perception that they may be taken out. And that wasn't the case back then. I mean, the shows would go through an entire series of seasons, whether it was 3 seasons or 6 seasons or 7 seasons, and we had the main characters there, and we always knew the main characters were safe. And then suddenly Dallas comes along and says, oh no, maybe not so much. And I think that was a really cool thing that happened with Dallas. And then if you look on, it took a while for television to start to do that again. But they were, maybe I could be mistaken. Someone could say that there were shows that did that before, but from my recollection, Dallas was the first that I remember. They said no one is safe on the show.
And I read on about Dallas that when they first did the pilot of it, the executives were like, yeah, this show's going nowhere. They didn't think that it was going to be a hit. And it was 14 seasons. And one of the things I was surprised about when I read about it was it started in 1978. It ended in 1991. And in my brain, I'm thinking, did it end that late? Like, I thought it was more like 1984 or something, but it was still on as I was graduating high school, and I had no idea.
Yeah, it had a long life. It actually had a revision. TNT or TBS, I think it was TNT, brought it back with a lot of the original actors for a few seasons again. They did the same thing with Dynasty, a resurgence. But the show had a very long life, and even in its death throes when it wasn't doing really well in the last few seasons, it still was fairly pivotal. And you had some very huge moments. Who Shot JR being the number one. And I'll ask you guys if you remember other pivotal pilot points. But the best thing about Who Shot JR, or worst, depending on your perspective, was that the cliffhanger ended before the writer's strike started. So there was an extended period of time when they couldn't air the reveal, which just added to the fervor. I don't think it would have been anywhere near as big a deal if it didn't have time to fester because they couldn't air anything due to the writer's strike. So it lasted longer than it ever should have.
Yes, yeah, and I wish I would have seen more episodes. I never followed the story, and I want, the stories evolve over the years. I remember watching daytime soap operas, but the nighttime soap operas were all about everybody's wearing ball gowns and John, you got to talk about the fight scenes. You got to talk about that because we've talked about it on the podcast before about the way that things have changed as far as stunt doubles go.
So what Rochelle's alluding to is Dynasty took the fights to the next level. So in Dallas, you'd have Bobby and JR take swings at each other. Sometimes they found out they had a half-brother, Ray, who started the show as just like the ranch hand, and then it turns out he was a Ewing. Now, what they never revisit, let me just stay on that topic for a second, is Ray was having an illicit affair with Jock's niece, Lucy Ewing. And when it got found out that Ray was actually a Ewing, they never revisited the fact that he was then with his cousin. I mean, it was less Dallas and more Sweet Home Alabama there for a minute. But yeah, the fight scenes in Dallas were usually the guys. Dynasty took it to the next level with women and Crystal and Alexis ripping each other's hair off, except it wasn't Crystal and Alexis. It was two stuntmen in wigs and dresses rolling around pretending to be them. Kristen says, I remember my mom watched Dallas every Friday night, followed by Falcon Crest. Doreen says she still watches, speaking of daytime soaps, General Hospital.
General Hospital has been on a long time, long time.
And we've evolved so much that we went from fictional soap operas with, I think you mentioned Dynasty with the women, getting in fights, to the Real Housewives where they really get in fights. How much we've evolved. I mean, my God,
Yeah.
I just wish we could go back. It's so depressing.
I like the fiction better.
What's that?
I think I like the fictional better. I'd rather it be scripted and pretend.
Much better. Yes.
So I never really made that parallel, though. The Real Housewives is the same thing. It's the cattiness, the fighting, the who's sleeping with who, and where are we going to dinner tonight, as Dallas or Dynasty was. And again, I'm not a pro on either one of those, but I can relate a little bit more when you say Real Housewives.
Yeah. Well,
and ironically, writers' strikes led.
Really a fortunate thing. I mean, these are not characters that are written by somebody. These are legitimate people that are in the same human population as us, which is incredibly sad for all of us.
I think it's more scripted than we like to think. But I was going to say a writer's strike actually led to Dallas soaring into new heights, and in a sense, reality TV too, because reality TV through Big Brother. Big Brother is one of the first reality shows after Real World that really took off, and it did so during a writer's strike. They said, hey, we got a program we could put on 5 nights a week that's not scripted, that doesn't need writers, and that really helped propel reality television forward.
And I have somebody here that says they still watch The Young and the Restless and The Bold and the Beautiful. I do remember those. My mother used to watch One Life to Live, which I think has since been canceled, and All My Children. Mm-hmm. I remember those through the day. I could tell you about those episodes, but somehow at night, the night soap operas. And then, I don't know, John, this is, maybe it was just my family. We never watched CBS, and it could have been because on our Dow TV, we never got it in. I don't know. We didn't have cable. I might have only got the NBC and the UHF channel. I don't even know. But we never watched.
Well, and you mentioned, you said soap operas, and the amazing thing is these nighttime soap operas had sometimes 3, 4, 5, 10 times the budget of the daytime soap operas, and they only had to film once a week, whereas the people struggle. I mean, you want to really get a crash course on what it takes to be an actor? We make fun of soap operas, but they film every single day. They get script turnaround, which is ridiculous how fast they've got to learn that stuff and put to it. But there was Dallas. People have mentioned Falcon Crest. There was Knots Landing. There was Dynasty, which spun off the spin-off series, The Colbys. There were nighttime soaps about Models Inc., Paper Dolls. It just spun off this entire brand new genre that, for the most part, the thing they all had in common was money. Nobody did a nighttime soap opera about poor people. It was they owned the vineyards on Falcon Crest, or, they owned oil in Dallas and Dynasty. And it was just, honestly, at a time when the 70s, everyone was sober, it was just something to, women watched and talked about the clothes, and men watched and talked about the dress. It was something for everybody.
And I'm over here laughing, John, because as I'm listening to you, you're like, and there was Dynasty, and there was Dallas, and there was Knots Landing, and you're naming all these shows. And I'm picturing in my mind like a whole new vision of what it was like for you growing up as a child, because you have an intense knowledge of all these nighttime soap operas. And
I had to do my research. I had to study because I had to. I was like doing book reports to my mom while we watched.
Do you think that? I mean, I don't, not to get too deep into the sociology of it, but I'm wondering if this nighttime soap opera thing that really exploded in the 80s, do you think it coincided with 2-parent household working? Like, we moved because we were the latchkey kid generation, because so many of our parents and our families, both parents had to work. And so you had these decades where the daytime soap operas, came out, and they were, obviously, if you're home at noon or 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon watching the daytime soap operas versus being at work. And then suddenly in the 80s, you have these 2-parent household where both parents are working, the kids are coming home, we're latchkey kids. And so you see that audience and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. We can get this audience at night now if we do this nighttime soap opera.
Kristen,
I don't know, but I'm just trying to make it.
No, you're getting kudos from the chat room. Kristen says, "Good point, Chris."
Yeah.
And I'm sure there was something to that. You're probably 1,000% right, because the same crazy plot lines we saw in the daytime soaps turned into the nighttime soaps, with people having amnesia and evil twins and dying. The best one was Bobby Ewing died. And you mentioned earlier, like, nobody's safe. Nobody was safe from contract negotiations. Rarely did they walk away and get killed off. They were killed off because they were asking for too much money. The budgets got ridiculous. And then when they found out they didn't do as well outside of it, well, then it was all a dream. And they welcomed Patrick Duffy back with open arms. And there he was. He never died. That season was all a dream. An entire season never existed.
John, I think we can have a new show that is just you summarizing all of the 1980s nighttime soap operas. I think you would have a show there.
I could do it with soap operas, sitcoms. I got this. I mean, I watched a lot, played outside all day and watched TV all night. I mean, that was mainly 80s.
He could do it with.
So, all right. And movies like Beaches. I should have added I'll have something with Beaches in the transitional next week. I'll take care of you guys. Last words on Dallas, either from our studio audience or from you guys. Melinda says, "Shell, that's basically his YouTube shorts."
Yeah, Michelle just said, there it is, Beaches. I want to say Tracks and Relax. My mother didn't work, so the TV was hers during the day, and my father ruled the TV at night, which is pretty interesting. That I think my dad actually kind of ruled the early part of the evening, and then my mom took over later in the evening, which kind of made sense in terms of the shows that they watched. Unless it was Thursday night.
Right.
I owned it. Thursday night, I owned it because I loved Magnum PI and Simon and Simon. So there you go.
Seinfeld, Cheers, Thursday night was awesome forever. Cosby Show, Wings. But I digress. All right, moving on. Dallas was our first. We've talked about it. I could personally talk about it for another 3.5 hours, but apparently they may only be me. But if ever they want to bring it back for a third time, I've got most of the lines memorized. I could even play Sue Ellen if I absolutely needed to. Hey, they let the stunt doubles wear the wig. Why not the actors? So number 2 topic, taking us from the 70s, coming smack dab into the next era with Thelma and Louise. A fun buddy flick that ends in a horrible, horrible way that I got to tell you, I didn't see coming throughout the movie. But hopefully this is one you guys watched and can speak to a little bit more.
The first thing I think of, besides Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon being phenomenal in that movie, is our very early introduction to Brad Pitt.
Definitely.
Yeah, Brad Pitt being, and dang, he was
It Boy.
Oh, he was. He really, truly is. There's a reason he was thought to be attractive by like a lot of our generation, is because even back then he was, and he's the one that caused all the problems, basically, for Thelma and Louise.
Well, to be fair, I wouldn't put it all on Brad. They kind of got themselves in trouble before picking up that good old country boy, but okay.
I'm shocked, Shell, that your recollection is Brad Pitt from Thelma and Louise. Just like John and I, even though John hasn't seen all of Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which I still can't believe that he's seen all of Beaches, but not Fast Times, that Phoebe Cates, for a lot of us boys back then, was similar in terms of, I mean, we had a plethora to choose from, of course, but I'm not surprised because didn't he do Legends of the Fall right after that? It was like, that's like the perfect looking dude. I mean, honestly, like the perfect looking human being in Legends of the Fall. Yeah.
I mean, he was a pretty boy, but he wasn't a pretty boy. He had like some facial scars. I remember I was reading about like he was initially going to be a model, but he wasn't super tall, and he was really pretty to look at, but he had like acne scars. So I mean, he was like the perfect mix where you could be like, all right, he's a guy's guy. I would have a beer with Brad Pitt. I would love to go out and have a beer with Brad Pitt. And, my wife would like to just sit there and stare at him while I'm having a beer with Brad Pitt. Oop. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I'm a huge Gina Davis fan. I love Gina Davis. So for me, and then, beyond just the two main characters, I'm also a huge Harvey Keitel fan. So anytime that he's in a movie as well, which he was part of Thelma and Louise. But yes, it was definitely like it was a groundbreaking movie in a lot of ways. And what's funny to me is that, Ridley Scott directs this groundbreaking female, I think somebody mentioned female empowerment in the chat. So here's Ridley Scott, directing this groundbreaking female empowerment movie in 1990, right? And then in 1991, his wife, I always forget her name. She won the Academy Award for The Hurt Locker. She directed The Hurt Locker. If anybody can remember her name, but somebody will say it in the chat. But she directed arguably one of the best guy action movies of all time in 1991, which was Point Break. So and they were married. I think they were married at the time. So here you have this real. It's an interesting dynamic to me that they kind of flipped, and they each directed movies that were geared towards, different genders. I find it fascinating. I don't know. That's just me, maybe.
Well, and
so was there a buddy flick featuring two women before Thelma and Louise? If there was, it's not coming immediately to mind. This was the movie that, to me at least, as a 1989, it kind of started getting, it came out 1990, I think. So I was 20 years old. It was one of the first that I remember truly selling the fact that two women in a car on a trip could run a movie, and they ran the hell out of it.
Mm-hmm. They did. They owned the screen on that one. But I do remember watching at the end, like with the hand thing, where they grab each other's hand and they go over and they do the dramatic car launching off of the cliff kind of thing. And in my mind, I just kept thinking, you don't think you could have explained this to the cops? Like, you don't think you might have gotten a way out of this? You had to go this route, and I remember thinking that, but then at the same time, I'm thinking, well, then that might mean they'd have to go back to their abusive relationships and so on. But there were a lot of options I think they could have done.
Well, and I think it spoke to the fact that they went out on their terms. I mean, it took a dark turn. Some people have postulated that they actually didn't mean to go over. They were just very bad women drivers and just couldn't turn the wheel the way they meant to. Maybe they let Jesus take the wheel a few years earlier before it became a song, and that's where he went with it. I didn't like the ending. I agree with you. I'm like, seriously? You're empowering these women and they can't fix the problem.
Yeah.
They can get into trouble. They can be tough. They can be strong. They can go out on their own. But at the end of the day, their solution is not fixing their problem. I didn't like the way it ended.
And
if it were remade, I bet you they'd change the ending.
I don't know if you can't have Thelma and Louise without the ending, though. You can't have them without the car. It's that would be sacrilegious. You just couldn't do it. Even though I didn't.
Michelle says, I thought the ending was a cliffhanger to a second movie because I don't think, the 80s was big for Chips or any of those shows showing a car, Dukes of Hazzard, going over the cliff, and then you see explosion at the bottom of the cliff. I don't remember an explosion. So maybe they jumped out. It was a convertible, and they're just hanging like, Wile E. Coyote style off a limb, waiting for the remake.
Well, they could have been like Evel Knievel. You just never know. I think, though, the ending, what I like about the ending is what we've talked about a lot, and I talk about a lot when it comes to 80s movies, is that typically movies in the 80s ended exactly the way that we hoped that they would. Unless they were continuing a saga like Friday the 13th or something, and he jumps over the boat at the end or something like that. We know he's coming back. They typically ended the way we hoped. We're rooting for this person, and at the end of it, we're like, yeah, that's what we wanted to happen. And that's not a bad thing, by the way. It seems cheesy on the surface, but in reality, it's not a bad thing. I think we need a little more of that these days. But the 1990, there was so much of a shift and change in culture. And we just talked about it with Dallas. The nighttime soap operas turn into these, these younger stars with these younger stories for younger people. The music was turning from, the kind of poppy metal to the grunge. And now you start to have movies say, you know what? We're not going to give you the ending that you wanted. We're actually going to give you something a little bit different. And so that, I think, it was the beginning, one of the first movies to really do that for us. And I like that about the ending, at least in that way.
I like your point, Chris. I really do.
I do too.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Very nice.
Melinda says 9 to 5.
Interesting. I feel like the end of an 80s movie. I got this great praise at the end. That's awesome. All right.
Yeah.
Both Kristen and Melinda simultaneously said that 9 to 5, the women took over and that it was a great empowerment movie. Ironically, that was one of our topics last week. So if you haven't seen the Three View Mirror podcast on our YouTube page from last week, 9 to 5 will be there.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing was Susan Sarandon. I mean, and Gina Davis, just huge. I guess you say actors today. Mm-hmm. It's wrong to say actresses, and I always forget that. But we're Gen X. We really don't care. The people that get paid to make movies.
Just call them stars.
But they were huge actresses. They were huge actors. They carried movies. They were amazing. What other movies do you guys remember? One of my all-time favorites, Susan Sarandon, at a time in history when older women lost their power to be beautiful, to be sexual, to be overtly sexy. Susan Sarandon made Bull Durham when she was way past what would have been an expiration date back then, and just said, fuck you to the whole world. I'm still hot as hell. And she was.
I was going to say that the baseball movie. That was what I couldn't come up with the name of it, but I knew which one you were talking about.
Yeah, Bull Durham.
You don't remember Bull Durham?
No,
fantastic movie.
Didn't they do baseball in that movie? Wasn't he? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, but I couldn't remember the name.
Don't let John give you a hard time. He hasn't seen Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Don't even let him give you a hard time about Bull Durham.
Bull Durham was better than Fast Times.
Oh, okay. Well, we can have that discussion.
Anyway.
Yeah. So I would say
let the audience decide.
Susan Sarandon. Here we go, because every episode we do talk about what show?
Friends.
Susan Sarandon was in Friends. She was a soap opera star.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so weird how every week we can connect back to Friends. It's insane.
And Brad Pitt was in Friends, from Thelma and Louise to Friends.
Yeah.
Listen,
one of the best episodes.
A lot of people slam Friends. It hasn't survived the test of time as well. And I'm like, whatever. It's still being shown on like 4 different channels, ad nauseum, 24/7. So it had value. I think it was incredibly well written. Some people just don't like it today. Oh, well, don't watch it. But yeah, Friends stands the test of time when it comes to pop culture because we can always link back to Friends.
Yep.
No, you go to the mall right now. Well, the malls are abandoned. Go anywhere right now where there's Gen Z. Sorry, that was a bad example. And go anywhere where Gen Z is, and you're going to see at least one of them wearing a Friends T-shirt. A throwback Friends T-shirt. So,
Kristen just said 6 degrees of Friends. Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that if we really think about it, Friends is the cheat. Because I'm like, so what's the connection, guys? You're like, Friends. Almost every week, I think you could probably do it and force your way in to Friends, which it's not the connection this week, but it could be, I guess.
Alyssa said Gina Davis in A League of Their Own, which there's a commercial out right now for like Visa Travel Rewards or something that is basically a mock-up of A League of Their Own. That was an incredible movie.
League of Their Own, again, female-driven. Had some great male leads. I mean, Tom Hanks, of course, and had a bunch of cameos. But honestly, the show was, I guess, in a nutshell about Tom Hanks and Gina Davis. But for me, the women ran the movie. Madonna. I mean, we haven't really done it justice, and I don't want to get distracted and go into it because it definitely deserves its own topic. But yeah, without a doubt, one of my favorite movies as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Gina Davis, my first introduction to her, because I know I love the movie Tootsie, but I was 12 years old. I think I was 15 or 16 when she did back-to-back did Fletch and then The Fly. And that was my first real introduction to Gina Davis, and both incredible movies. And that was when I really saw her, and I was like, whoa, she's really good. And I mean, being 16-year-old kid, I was like, wow, she's beautiful too. But she could really play these very different roles. I mean, if even in Fletch, where she played kind of the buttoned up, I think she was like the lieutenant colonel or detective, the head lead detective in the she was the newspaper editor. And then in The Fly, very different, of course. And then on to Thelma and Louise. So she's very much a chameleon when it comes to the different roles that she could take as well.
What was the
I will say much.
I'm sorry. No, what was the movie where she was not a spy, a secret agent? And I'd swear Samuel L. Jackson was in the movie. I think he was in that movie. It was one of my favorites of hers, but I can't think of the name of it.
Was it The Long Kiss Goodnight?
Yes.
Yeah, that's really good, and it was very underrated. Yes,
I love that movie. I've seen that multiple times, and I still quote little things from that movie because do you remember when the dog was licking itself, and the guy said in his English accent, he said, "Look, whatever's in there is either there for good or here to stay, or whatever it was. It's either gone for good or there to stay." It stuck in my mind. I don't know.
Yeah, she's had a great career. Somebody else mentioned in the chat Beetlejuice, which
I
don't know if she's if she's in Beetlejuice. I kind of hope she is, but we'll see. We'll know in about a month.
I don't know, and we haven't seen much of her or Susan Sarandon in the last so many years. I can't think of too many things. It's like they retired or something. Can you think? It's been quite a few years, I think, since we've seen either of them.
Very quiet recently.
Yeah. Melinda says, I'm a straight woman and I think Gina Davis is absolutely beautiful. Well, I'm a straight guy and I think Brad Pitt's absolutely beautiful. So that's all good. All right. Anything else to add? We're at the 36-minute mark at the moment. We still have a little bit of time if you need it. But if not, we can move on to part 3 of the ThreeView Mirror podcast.
I'm good with part 3.
Good with part 3?
I'm good with it.
So part 3.
Give me a mountain and nothing to do. Give me the sunshine, give me your dew. Give me something simple and true. All I need is sunshine and smooth, refreshing mountain dew. Yeah, give me a river, give me a dew. Give me my good friends, give me a dew.
For something that was so amazingly unhealthy for us, loaded with sugar and caffeine and artificial colors and all of that stuff. When I remember watching the commercials where everybody is on skis and jumping from ropes into ponds and just having like ski-doos and skiing down a mountain slope, the best life ever because of Mountain Dew. The commercials, the anthem, which was like their jingles were more like anthems, just hyped me up. And then, of course, the soda filled with sugar and caffeine also hyped me up.
And I always think of the line from, what is it, Step Brothers? Did you drink my Mountain Dew or whatever? Isn't that from Step Brothers where he says something about, did you drink my Mountain Dew?
I remember very different lines from Step Brothers.
So much more room for activities.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, and others as well.
And others, yes.
Yeah. I was actually not a big soda kid growing up, but Mountain Dew was my preference. Mountain Dew and actually Mellow Yellow. I guess I just liked that type of, and I think they probably just did a great job of marketing to me, I would suspect, because again, I didn't drink a lot of soda growing up. I mean, it was available to me, but I just chose not to drink it for whatever reason. I never really liked it until I poured Coke into some Jack Daniels, and then that changed my life.
The rest is history.
Yeah.
It was amazingly well marketed. It was ridiculously well marketed. It was a second tier soda that kind of broke through, much like Dr. Pepper did, on the virtues of their commercials. I'm a pepper, you're a pepper, wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? This goes into that 80s genre of just commercials that created jingles that entered into our pop culture and our lexicon. Mountain Dew became pop culture. And again, you can even make a point that we didn't have energy drinks when we were growing up like they have today. And soda was basically our energy drink.
I'm sorry, I need to correct you there. It's pop.
No.
Soda.
It's Coca-Cola. That's even people called Mountain Dew Coca-Cola.
Oh, I hate that so much. I live in the South now. I hate that. I'll have a Coke. What kind? Coke. I just told you. Melinda's on my side. It's soda. Chris is on my side. It's soda. Actually, it's funny. In Rochester, it was pop, and then just an hour down the road in Buffalo, depending on where you were, it was soda. It's soda pop.
Yeah, soda pop. Okay. Yeah. See, that's why we have a good relationship, John. Compromise.
And I was a big, I mean, Mountain Dew, yeah, you're right. They had great marketing, and they really, I mean, they targeted, I mean, it's interesting how they targeted active people and saying that you could do all these things with your Mountain Dew, which, you know, carbonated drinks are so terrible for us. But somehow they figured out that, you know, hey, if we market this, maybe we can grab a audience share away from some of these bigger brands that have owned the market for so long. And I do want to point out that we did actually, now this was late 80s, but wasn't it late 80s when we finally did get our own kind of quote unquote energy drink with Jolt Cola?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Jolt was
Jolt Cola came along in the late 80s out of Rochester, New York, actually my hometown. And it's that was when the colas were doing the uncola thing, where they were getting the caramel coloring out, and you would do like Crystal Pepsi. They would do the no caffeine with Pepsi free, when sodas tried to be healthy. And a couple guys in Rochester said, well, no one's drinking soda to be healthy. You guys are missing the point. So they started a marketing campaign where it said all of the sugar and twice the caffeine, or twice the sugar and all the caffeine. And I can never remember which way it went, but they were celebrating the fact that their cola was bad for you. Yeah, still nowhere near as much caffeine, by the way, as one Red Bull.
Oh, somebody told me I have an echo somewhere on my Facebook. Oh, I don't. I bet you I know why. Hold on. I know I had that last time.
Well, while you're figuring that out, I wonder also too, like, you know, there's something to this is part of the marketing too, but the branding, the package itself. And so you had all these sodas that were dark colors, and then suddenly you come with Mountain Dew that's kind of this, I don't know, almost like this Modern Problems nuclear green color was attractive, I suppose. At least it was to me. And I wonder if maybe that was part of it too, just helping it break through that clutter of all the darker colored sodas.
Well, even think of the name Mountain Dew. So, I mean, there's nothing cleaner in a clean environment anyway than like the dew off a blade of grass up in the mountains in the rural areas of our country. I mean, the antithesis of what soda was. They marketed, to your point, to active people. Even the name itself was to bring visions of clarity and cleanliness and health. They were geniuses. And then on top of it, they got us all wearing their name as clothing. I still have a Mountain Dew t-shirt. Mm-hmm. People paid lots of money for Coca-Cola rugby shirts. I think Pepsi got in on the act a little late, but that was frowned upon. Everybody's wearing Coke shirts. You wore a Pepsi, you look like an idiot.
But I was about to say before my sound, before I did the sound thing there.
You all right, Michelle?
Yeah.
It sounds like you had a frog in your throat.
Oh, I did. Maybe I need to drink a pop.
I'm like, is she not gonna? You clear your throat more than anyone, and I'm like, she's not done it once.
Do I really?
Well, at least we made fun of it. We make fun of it when you do. And this entire episode, I've not seen you drink any of your LaCroix, and you have not coughed once. I'm like, she's not gonna do it.
You were waiting to do that for
any of your liquor or LaCroix?
LaCroix. I usually drink my LaCroix, but yeah, my grapefruit LaCroix. No, what I was going to say before the sound thing was it was a status symbol whenever you were in high school. I can remember to get your glass bottle with the styrofoam label, and you sat it right there at your desk if the teacher was the type that allowed that. And this was a time when pop soda was not as it wasn't as available. There was maybe one machine somewhere. It was at the fire hall, or it was down at the local convenience store. Whereas, now it's just pervasive everywhere. And you carried that around with, the little metal lid and the styrofoam label. You carried that around like you were important because you had a do.
You had a do.
I would disagree with you. We had a soda vending machine in our cafeteria in school. And I think they actually got kickback from like Coke or Pepsi to the school. I remember them celebrating the fact that, guys, every time you buy a Pepsi product, 12 cents goes to the Parent Teacher Association. I'm like, what's next? Cigarettes?
There weren't as many brands. There weren't as many. Like did you ever walk into a convenience store now and you're looking, if it's a big convenience store, you didn't just have Coke and Pepsi. There are things on that wall I don't even know the names of anymore. It's exploded.
Can I also point out that I looked up Mountain Dew just, because I was curious about maybe some fun facts. And
You're not allowed to look things up during the show. You could find the clue.
no, I guarantee you that I couldn't, because I'd probably see it right in front of me and my brain wouldn't formulate it. But in the 1950s, Mountain Dew had an advertisement that they used this guy called Willie the Hillbilly. And their tagline was, "It'll tickle your innards." I'm just going to leave it at that. It'll tickle your innards. I'm not sure you can.
Well, that was also the time that Coca-Cola had actual Coke. Back then, didn't Coke have actual cocaine in it? So I guess tickling your innards is the least of what soda would do for you.
I'm pretty sure that was like the turn of the century, John, but that's okay. We'll let you have that one.
Whatever. Just jealous because you didn't get Coke at school like I did. And so did Melinda. Oh, and Doreen, of course, the Pepsi challenge, which we've talked about because that's what led to the whole new Coke fiasco.
Mm-hmm.
And wasn't the Pepsi challenge where some kid won an F-16 fighter jet because there's a whole documentary.
That wasn't the Pepsi challenge, but that was where you could get points from Pepsi. And at the end of the commercial, it said X number of points. And in the catalog, there was a fighter jet. And the kid somehow managed to get the points and sued. He lost. Yeah. He lost the lawsuit. Pepsi tried to settle with him, and he's like, no, I want my fighter jet. But he ended up losing. But there's a great documentary on that if you want to see it. It's somewhere.
Yeah.
I remembered hearing about it, but it wouldn't have been one of the documentaries that I would want to sit for an hour and a half and watch. But
it was entertaining, actually.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I just,
Meh. 1906 is when cocaine was removed from Coke. Thank you, Trax and Relax. See, it wasn't 1940s or 50s. You were wrong, Shell.
No, I said it was turn of the century. Oh, you're getting me now. Okay, all right. Yep.
So wait, 1906. Okay, that's actually kind of cool, though, that, before that, people were getting their cocaine via soda, I guess.
Well, and then in the 80s, people were just getting cocaine as cocaine because it was snowing everywhere. Yeah. Supposedly, I don't know. I bypass. I will say, now I'm not saying I'm better than anyone else or nicer than anyone else or more saintly than anyone else, but the whole cocaine in the 80s things passed me by. I must have been just too young, but I don't know. I'm told it was everywhere.
I'm told it was everywhere too, but I was one of those people that the whole DARE campaign and Just Say No and the commercial where the beautiful woman took out her teeth and showed what a haggard old lady she was. I was like, I don't want to be her and I'm not trying that shit.
Now that's just what everybody looks like without filters.
That's yeah. I don't think no.
I know, I'm just kidding.
No. And I will say that for those wondering, the ThreeView Mirror podcast is brought to you with no filters whatsoever. This is just natural beauty across the page you see before you. This is what 50s looks like today. Three friends playing.
Yeah.
Melinda says, I never did Coke, but seen a lot of it. Kristen says, all right, I learned it by watching you.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
So the only other thing I wanted to say, go ahead, Chris.
No, go. Go. Continue.
No, I'm the host. I'll let you go.
I want to hear what you had to say.
I was going to say, the only other thing I was going to say about Mountain Dew is that it kind of was this thing where we thought we were like, there was a counterculture as well. Michelle said that it was kind of cool carrying your Mountain Dew. There was a counterculture feel when your soda choice wasn't Pepsi or wasn't Coke. It wasn't one of the big two. It sets you apart. And when you had a Dr. Pepper or when you had a Mountain Dew, you kind of the choice of a new generation. Gen X was that generation that was like, I'm not going to do the big two. I'm going to have a Mountain Dew. No, what we didn't know is that I think it was Pepsi that owned Mountain Dew and Coke owned Dr. Pepper. They created their own competition and kind of soft pedaled that. It wasn't like real front facing that was their product. They wanted us to feel like we were choosing something different when we, in fact, were just feeding their coffers, still giving them our money in a different way.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good point. And I'd never really thought about it that way. But, we were teenagers and we have a little angst like most teenagers do. And Coca-Cola was telling us that they want to give a Coke so the world can sing and we'll all love everybody and kumbaya and let's hold hands around the world. Meanwhile, we're like 14, 15 years old. We hate everyone. And
Yep.
Mountain Dew and Dr. Pepper, you're right. They're kind of the counterculture. And they weren't telling us that we were all kumbaya. They were showing us something very different. So I've never really thought about it that way, but it absolutely makes sense. And again,
And even the way they marketed to us, that was the beginning of product placement starting. So you'd watch Miami Vice and there'd be something there. You'd watch Magnum there. And they started like surreptitiously placing these things where we would see them. And they weren't even directly marketing to us anymore. It was subliminal. It was softer. It was trying, because they knew. They learned really early on, especially when it came to our generation, we didn't want to be sold to. I could love something, crave it, desire it, want it more than anything else. But the minute you tell me that I should buy it, I don't want it anymore.
You talked about product placement, and somebody said the first time they heard about cocaine was on Miami Vice, Trax and Relax, and I'm like, yeah. I immediately started thinking about that was like the cartel's product placement on television was actually Miami Vice.
Whenever I was in elementary school, we used to sing about Coca-Cola. You mentioned the Coca-Cola that I'd like to teach the world to sing. That's the famous song. But we used to sing.
Now I should have saved.
I'm clearing the throat.
This is the Let Me Clear My Throat segment on ThreeView Mirror Podcast every week.
Oh, I love that.
To sing for you. That's why I cleared my throat. We used to sing a dumb song. Okay, we'll end the segment here. We used to sing a dumb song. We used to sing, Coca-Cola came to town, Pepsi Cola shot him down, Dr. Pepper fixed him up, now we're drinking 7-Up, knock, knock, rattle, 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 honk, baby. That's what we used to sing. So there.
Wow.
Has anybody ever, Chris, have you ever heard that?
I've never heard it. I mean, it did remind me of the little thing that they sang in the movie Big.
Yeah, I remember that one. And comments, has anybody ever heard what Rochelle just did? Ever?
And the alien letter was real. Doreen knows.
I mean, honestly, no, this one, I don't know where you come up with this stuff. And you remember it so well. It's like, to all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on it. Says, everybody knows that. The stuff you come up with, Shell, I don't know. Sorry, Shell. I've never heard it, Shell, but it was amazing. Nope, Shell. And then Michelle is throwing you a pity vote with, yes, I've heard it before. You're lying.
Yeah, nope. I mean, this is the difference between where we grew up. You sang that 7-Up song, and we would do my mother and your mother went out to hang clothes. My mother punched your mother
right in the nose.
What color was the blood?
Yeah. I knew that.
Michelle goes laughing my ass off. Truth. It was a pity vote.
Doreen says the alien letter was real, but never heard that jingle. I just still don't believe the alien letter, but.
All right. So, wow. Before that transition, we've talked about the nighttime soap opera phenomenon that was Dallas. We've talked about the iconic buddy movie, the Cagney and Lacey before Cagney and Lacey on the big screen, or maybe after Cagney and Lacey, but regardless, the chick flick buddy movie Thelma and Louise, and we finish off with the counterculture soda that was Mountain Dew. Starting with our guests in-house, without revealing, do you think either of you think you know the connection?
I have a random wild guess, but don't.
Random is what you do.
Yeah, random wild guess, but don't truly know it.
Okay, Chris?
I have none. I was trying to connect, somebody to all three, but I really have none. I don't know.
What's your random wild guess, Shell?
I was thinking that it had something to do with Elvis Presley because Priscilla Presley was in Dallas. And then I'm thinking in Thelma and Louise, there was always a jukebox. Maybe he was playing on the jukebox there or something. And then I'm thinking maybe it's something to do with writing the Mountain Dew song at some point. So that was my guess, Elvis Presley.
Wow.
Wrong. No, I'm wrong.
Couldn't be more wrong.
I know.
Couldn't be more wrong.
I knew it.
Horribly wrong. So bad. I'm embarrassed to even mention. Next time, just say I don't know.
I thought it was a decent connection.
So, the connection as, well, let me just say this.
It was Chris.
Both Michelle and Trax and Relax in our comment section has it. And the connection is none other than Brad Pitt. We've talked about throughout the segment. We started with Dallas. Well, Brad Pitt played a part in Dallas in the 80s. Back in 1987, he had a one-season story arc where he played the role of Presley's daughter's boyfriend. He was 24, playing the part of a teenager, looked very much like a teenager, and was on Dallas. Obviously, we mentioned the Thelma and Louise connection because that was his iconic role that propelled him to stardom. And then finally, he did a ton of commercials, not the least of which was him on a pond riding behind a boat on water skis in a Mountain Dew commercial. Part of their Country Dew commercial that went out and played actually for about 7 years. So it's Brad Pitt. But what amazed me when I did the research is 1987 was the year he was on Dallas. It was also the year he did the Mountain Dew commercial. It was also the year he took a non-credited role in the movie No Way Out, a non-credited role in the movie Less Than Zero. He was on the daytime soap opera the same year, Another World. In the same year, he took a two-part story arc in Growing Pains. And just all of this in 1987. 1988, he did a Pringles commercial, started doing some Levi's commercials, and then really went nuts with Thelma and Louise. But the guy was everywhere, and I don't remember him being everywhere before he was huge, but he was.
Yeah, that does sound like he was everywhere, but he was so gorgeous. That was just the thing. He was you said it before, though, he had that sort of a rough every man's look to him. He was not pretty boy picture perfect.
He was a pretty boy too. I mean, if you look at him at Dallas, they had that big 80s swooping hair. He was very much the pretty boy there. He could play both parts.
Yes. It get down and dirty. That's how I like to think of Brad Pitt.
I mean, my favorite roles by Brad Pitt aren't even like the pretty boy roles. That's one thing I really admire about him is that, again, we're talking about first. I know he wasn't the first, but he was, in my recollection, at least for my lifetime, one of the first guys that could have just traded on his looks completely and didn't do that. He actually, I mean, you could say 12 Monkeys, obviously, but the two that stick out to me are Mickey O'Neill and Snatch, where he played the Pikey. That's like just such an awesome role, but he plays this like dirty gypsy guy. And then California, where he plays a serial killer. And California with a K, if none of you have seen it.
And Juliette Lewis.
Great. Yeah, Juliette Lewis and what's his name from David Duchovny from X-Files.
Yeah.
But man, does he play a really creepy ass role in California.
Yeah.
So that's what I like about him is that he'll take on roles where he wasn't trading on his looks, which I thought was, especially at a time where he was in his prime with his looks and could have just traded on him constantly and didn't.
It's really easy to be ugly, though. Like, I will always say it's really easy to be ugly when you're that pretty. Like, when people are like, oh, it's so courageous of him. Look, or like when these really amazingly beautiful, like who's the one from Monster? The woman.
Charlize Theron.
Yeah.
They were like, my God, how courageous of her. Courageous my ass. The woman's drop dead gorgeous. So for one movie, she allowed herself to gain 4 pounds and put prosthetics on. It's not that courageous to be ugly when you're that beautiful.
But you have to be, it shows that they have acting chops.
Yeah.
Unlike
It does.
a lot of the pretty people in Hollywood who do not.
Yeah.
And so it shows that they have acting chops and that they can do that. And he does.
Although his acting chops came later. The thing about those early, if you go back and just Google Brad Pitt on Dallas, Google Brad Pitt on Growing Pains, he was playing the part of a teenager, but he was a 23, 24-year-old man. And man, when I tell you the acting was bad. I mean, monumentally, embarrassingly bad. At that point, I would say he was trading on his looks because his acting didn't get him on the screen.
Didn't cut it.
It
No,
usually doesn't when you first start.
Inglourious Bastards, I think, is an underrated Brad Pitt film that is absolutely incredible. It's a great movie.
Well, Quentin Tarantino. Seven is one of my
Seven. Oh,
Wow.
Seven.
the box.
The box.
What's in the box?
Horrible movie. Amazing movie, but horrible movie. Like how, oh my God. Don't open the box. Don't open the box.
They didn't tell him what was in the box. That was his first time seeing it. And it was like this replica head of Gwyneth Paltrow, like that looked real. Obviously, they're very good in Hollywood.
Did not know that.
But they didn't. He did not see what was in the box, and that's why he's saying like, "What's in the box?" And that was all filmed with him knowing.
And I mean, talk about being in pop culture, not just his movies. Brad Pitt's a pop culture icon. The relationships he had, Gwyneth Paltrow, Jennifer Aniston, adopting 15 kids. What's her name?
Oh my God, too
Angelina-
much.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Angelina
Jolie.
Yeah.
And at the time, it was Jennifer Aniston that was America's Sweethearts. I mean, that was when the two of them got together. His stint on Friends, one of my absolute favorites. And again, coming back to Friends, he was awesome on Friends.
Yeah, that was a great.
But yeah,
great episode.
huge pop culture icon. Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12, those movies were incredible. Just the guy's got it. I think it was Doreen said never been a big fan of him, but Doreen, I'll bet you like that Friends episode. And then of course there was the first incident of a nudie leak for a guy. Before him, it was, Vanessa Williams and Madonna and the Penthouse leaks, which ironically cost Vanessa Williams her Miss America crown, but she's the only Miss America that ever had a career after, so I guess it helped her. But Brad Pitt had the nudes with, he was on a beat, he was in a cabin home or something with Gwyneth Paltrow, and somebody with one of those long cameras got nudes of him. And it was like the first time a guy was outed that way.
I didn't know about that. I
don't know. Here's me, Google.
Well, I mean, yeah, they got him. I did the research on it. He sued Playgirl, but it didn't. He lost. They posed an entire Playgirl magazine. I guess there were still magazines then that it just showed him. There it is in all his glory. And he's like, okay, whatever.
Was it?
Now it happens every other day, but at the time he's like, he tried to stop it, but what was that, Shell?
I said, was it a lot of glory or just a little bit of glory?
I didn't look. I didn't need that in my search engine history.
John had to pause,
Algorithms.
John had to pause.
What's that?
John had to pause Beaches and take a look.
Yeah, no, I didn't. Listen, I made the mistake of looking at things I don't need to look at. And the Google algorithms, they're not friendly to you. You look at the wrong thing, you'll be watching it for a good 6 weeks. Someone's looking over your shoulder and seeing ads that you're like, I swear to God, I don't know why it's showing me that.
Yeah, you can easily type in the wrong thing very easily. In fact, there was a comedian that talked about that the other night on I am not a reality show person overall, but I do love America's Got Talent because I just think it's so cool to see people who would have never who have these amazing talents that in this day and age can get the exposure that 30 or 40 or 50 years ago, the only chance they ever had was to go on the Gong Show, which was ridiculous. And now there's this actual avenue to success. And there was a comedian. She was a grandmother. She was in her, like, I think late 70s or mid 70s. And she had just started doing comedy a couple of years ago. And she's very funny. And she talked about
very
exactly
cool.
that, the Google searches. Yeah.
Yeah, Kristen said in our live studio audience, we're being told, Kristen Sensi says, incognito mode is your friend when it comes to Google search. Yeah, see, I don't trust that. I think that's kind of like telling your worst, if you have one deep, dark secret, you only tell it to your worst enemy. So incognito mode is you just telling Google. And I don't trust Google well enough to tell it the things that I don't want anyone else knowing.
What's incognito?
I've seen it. So you do
I'm just kidding.
it's a button, I think.
He said he knew what it was. Hey, wait, somebody said Fight Club. Tyler Durden.
Fight Club.
Oh,
yeah.
Tyler Durden.
Yeah. That's a great one. David Fincher, the director, Fight Club and Seven, does some pretty awesome dark stuff. And yeah, this was a good one. I mean, I loved it, even though I'll be honest, like when going back to the three topics that, Dallas, I was not a big nighttime soap opera fan, but obviously growing up in the 80s, I'm well aware of all those. And then Thelma and Louise, I think I saw it once. So I had to go back to that. But again, the people that were in the movie Thelma and Louise, just like the people that were in the nighttime soap operas, made me very familiar. And then, I was a big Mountain Dew fan because I thought it just made me a better skateboarder. So,
well, that's it. It was counterculture. It was cool.
Yeah.
Our generation bought into cool. As long as we thought it was our idea. We didn't like someone telling us what was cool, even though now as adults we look back and we weren't as counterculture as we thought at the time. We were manipulated. Marketing still works. They just had to come at us differently. And that was kind of why I wanted to bring Mountain Dew into it, because I am a huge fan of how marketing works. And even when people say, no, I don't buy into marketing. Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
If it's working, you don't know that you're buying into it.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Doreen says she was definitely lost today, but it's good. We did, Michelle, I think it was, and Trax. So we did have a couple that guessed it. So I will admit to the fact that earlier we had our pre-show text, and the guys asked me if I had my topics, and I told them yes. And literally, guys, that's the moment that I came up with these was while we were on that text. I told you this week got away from me. I had no idea what I was going to do today.
Well, you did good.
You did good. I just saw somebody mention the Friends episode, and I just keep going back to when they're sitting at a table and Brad Pitt's character says, we had an I Hate Rachel club. And she says, who was in this club? Me and Ross. And at the point, she knows who Ross is.
He was awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
One of my favorite episodes, definitely.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys, any final words?
I loved it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I always enjoy when I learn about topics that I just knew kind of broadly, but not specifics. So this was a lot of fun.
Cool.
As always.
Yeah. Always fun. Yes.
Well, I want to thank our live studio audience for joining. If you're listening or watching the podcast on delay, meaning watching it over on YouTube after the fact, just understand that every Friday right around 5:30, you can go to our Facebook page or our YouTube page and be part of the live studio audience. Interact with us as we film in real time, unedited, uncensored, live, and in person. Kind of a cool little concept that we hope you all love, and that you will bring a friend next week. Just something different that we're trying that I don't know that anybody else does. But back when we were kids, nearly every show was filmed live in front of a studio audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just to say the word friends again and reference it again, please bring your friends, tell your friends, let them know, subscribe and like. We love bringing this to all of you. We hope that you enjoy all the Gen X conversation that we have. And we're going to be doing this every Friday, as John said, at 5:30 live. So bring your friends. Let's have a lot of fun, and we'll all kind of throw back to a time that, a nostalgic time for all of us as we move into every weekend.
That's all I got. From me, I'll say see ya.
And I'll say see you too because you guys said it absolutely perfectly.
Stay rad, everybody.